Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast for Australia. There's one big kind of theme I think we're going to have to follow for the coming weeks. We've already established this. It's not like it's anything new, but it's all about this La Nina. And I just have big questions on how much of an influence it's going to have and if it's even going to matter, to be honest with you. So you're watching an animation. It's the last 90 days of ocean temperatures compared to average, and we're going through the month of September here, and you can see at times kind of surges of colder water that's coming through. But the question I have here is this going to be a dominant factor going forward, or are these sub-seasonal things like the movement of the MJO or the changes in the southern annular mode, or simply just movements of troughs and ridges to our south going to control things? And I'm going to have to tell you that given what I think I know about this La Nina, I'm not convinced it's going to be the dominant thing that it's set up to be in the models. And I think the models are too wet because of it. So every forecast you're about to see me show you from the longer range is going to show you a wet bias for Australia, like everywhere, like very little dry areas as we go forward through the next 6-7 months. And I think they're just way too heavily weighted on what's going on in this animation. And I want to be clear about this. If we look back over time, this is every big El Nino event. These are the spikes up and everyone down is a La Nina. I've showed you this lots and lots of times. I just want to be clear where we are. We're at the end of this. If you just kind of look in here, we came off of this decently strong El Nino last year and things came back down, but we're just sitting here. We're yet to see this kind of fully evolve into what often happens after a big El Nino event. Like we crash into at least a week, but oftentimes a moderate, even strong La Nina. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen. And just based off these ocean temperatures, I just don't see it at this point. Now, just as a reminder, the last time we moved into La Nina territory, it came off of, practically INSO-neutral conditions in 2019 into 2020. And then it was in the fall of 2020 for the Northern Hemisphere, spring of 2020 for the Southern Hemisphere, that we just saw this really dip down here to a moderate strength La Nina. And then we had 3 years of it. And I just want to remind you what a real La Nina looks like, because this isn't it. This is what it looked like in 2020. And I mean, you can just see the differences here. And in 2020, we were able to get quite a bit of precipitation from November to February. I mean, the driest spots were in the north. Most everywhere else where we have pretty intensive ag saw a normal to above normal precipitation. And so I just bring this up because there's going to be questions being asked about the strength of this particular La Nina. And I'm telling you right now, the trade winds are not kicking up strong enough easterly winds to signal this. I mean, look at the Southern Oscillation Index. It's practically zero. We need to be way up here. We need to see this line move up here and stay up here for a while for me to be convinced that as we go through the next 2 months, which is when a typical La Nina event should peak, that we're going to get its influence. And I got to be honest with you, as we look here in a little bit at let's just do this, okay? If we go look at BOM's forecast, let's see here. I want to do forecast. There we are. They were the least aggressive, right? The whole time on predicting this La Nina strength. And I told you, it was the United States. We're going after something big in December. And I don't understand, honestly, where the U.S. is getting these numbers. I think now you've seen other models like the European, the Japanese, the French, the Canadians. They've all settled back into a more, just neutral pattern. It's just the United States that's going aggressively after this. And they've all got it peaking in January. And watch, as you get into February and March, there's a pullback. And BOM is actually the most aggressive on turning this back over to possibly even weak El Nino-like conditions as soon as April. So I just need to let you know, I'm kind of giving the tip of the cap to BOM here, because if you go back and watch my videos over the last couple of months, I was siding more with what NOAA was saying, also what Meteo France was saying, the UK Met Office was saying. And I said, BOM, you're a little bit too much on the weaker side of things. Now, to be honest, their anomaly map here, I don't understand how they're getting these temperatures, because some of the satellite observations would suggest we're cooler than this by a bit. But still, they've got INSO-neutral conditions lasting all the way till March and April of next year. And they may have done a pretty darn good job picking up on that, to be honest with you. So we need to take this and understand that some of the bigger models, though, don't see that. So I want to walk you through that and kind of make sure we understand kind of our base before we get there, because the front half of this month has been quite dry across key ag areas. We did see some better precipitation sneak into South Australia, just slightly above average. But overall, as I look at this, there's been pretty dry conditions across the east, suggesting we've not had good flow off the ocean from the east. And even though pockets of Western Australia have seen decent down here, we're still dry. And that's why the new drought monitor for the month of October continues to show across key ag areas that they're still in, drought that is going to be impacting things going forward. And we just have questions as to whether or not we could break away from this. So I kind of find this to be a good way to catch up on where we've been. Now, speaking of where we've been, this is what the pattern was doing. And I think you're going to have to just get familiar with this as I go through it, because whenever we see these maps where you see velocity potential, this tells me the atmosphere, well, the pace and the scale at which it's breathing. And if you just want to think of it as an up-down, okay, it's, since the beginning of November, where the up is here. In fact, we're watching in the Caribbean. Now, remember, it's fall for us. It's late, or autumn, we call it fall here, autumn. What doesn't matter? It's late, and to still be getting tropical systems. This is past the end of our hurricane season. Our hurricane season typically would have ended 2 weeks ago, but we're still cranking things out. The moisture's really kicked up in South America. Why? This is where the lid is off. There's rising motion. And in several parts of the Pacific Ocean and in a large area of the Indian Ocean, we have suppression in the atmosphere. And on top of that, these first 11 days gave us deep troughs that were just to our south. And what that did was that while that brought fronts through, we overall did not pick up heavy precipitation that just continued to carry across Australia. We've seen more of an influence of ridging, extending maybe all the way from this side of New Zealand all the way back toward Australia. Well, this is gone. This whole thing is gone, like this big pressure pattern of a big ridge here and a trough there and another ridge. Over the next 15 days, the Antarctic Oscillation, which is also known as the Southern Annular Mode, has been moving positive, is going to stay there. And we see the height pattern resulting in something that's much, much less like where we've been and more about building in a pretty sizable ridge right here. And we're going to see that quite a bit, and it's going to affect the temperatures and the precipitation pattern I'm about to share with you. So let's go have a look at it. I just want to let you know my favorite thing to look at on the site is this. I like to land here and go, show me every model and how much they're precipitating, but I like to see them all kind of together to see if they all have the same shape. And you can kind of see it, right? We have something like this in every one of the models. And that's where we're looking for our heaviest precip. Now, what's important about this is look at these maps. In fact, let's just zoom in on the European here. Blow this up a little bit. If we just start adding up the precipitation, we've got decent moisture. I mean, quite a bit of moisture coming into parts of Queensland, coastal Queensland, New South Wales, a little bit into the interior. There's some, also here, and then we're going to watch late in the time period. I'll show you kind of how this comes through. Even some better moisture being forecast for parts of Western Australia. The drier spot is an area that, we were a bit wetter. And, I understand it's in the interior, it's toward the outback, and ag, there is ag in here, of course, but maybe not to the same scale as we have, in the corners of Australia. But overall, the pattern is kind of lending itself to just something different. And that high pressure cell is going to be key. So I want to give it to you another way. This is a 10-day outlook from the European model looking at precipitation anomalies or comparisons to normal. And we do notice in the middle part of Australia, just drier. And we will start to see, I think, some of this fill in a little bit better. So let's have a look at what the models are picking up on here. So starting this, let's refresh that real quick. Starting this early in the morning here on Thursday and playing forward, we just see kind of this ring setting up. In fact, in the U.S., I would call this a ring of fire, just storms and rain kind of around a large area of high pressure. We see a low that curls up just to our south. This is actually a pretty deep one here. And as it rolls through, it brings a front through parts of Victoria, over Tasmania, into New South Wales, delivering some better precipitation. The farther into the interior, this part of Western Australia, a lot of this is just isolated storms and some rain showers. So that front, when is it again? That's Sunday night, and it slides on through. And then watch. Can you almost see as I go back and forth? Just blow your eyes. You'll see better motion in this direction. So what you end up getting is Monday into Tuesday, that front advects, which means just moves to the north, and we start to bring better precipitation into parts of Queensland. All right. Now, as we go forward, we have another system that tries to come in next Wednesday, Thursday into Western Australia. And again, let's just watch that one again. This is Wednesday and Thursday of next week. We'll play this all the way out to the end of day 10, and there's that high. So that high is bringing that flow around, and we still have more systems that are kind of trying to skirt through. So it's an active pattern, but it's a very unique looking one given its overall precipitation, which again looks something like this over the next 10 days. I'll be honest with you, I don't expect this to verify very well. I really don't. I think it's going to change quite a bit from run to run, and you need to be aware of that. All right. What about week 2? So this is exclusively looking out there day 8 through 14. That would be the 21st through the 27th. Again, we have a wetter signal. That's not much, but it's a wetter signal for most of Australia, excluding parts of, Tasmania, and then Victoria and parts of New South Wales, and then here in New Zealand too. So this pattern's in flux. It's moving. It's changing from where it has been. So you're going to have to stick to the models nearly every day to kind of see how things pan out. And I want you to do that. That's why I built that site for you. From here, let's talk temperatures. Next 5 days, not highly anomalous. I mean, we got a few places that are warmer than average, as you can see here, a little bit cooler than average, farther to the north and west, near normal most other places. But by the time we get into week 2, remember how this is going to work. The flow comes around, better chances of rain, cooler because of cloud cover, same thing all through here. And in the interior, you're going to have warmth because there's going to be more sunshine, less clouds. And that lasts all the way out there day 12 through 15 as well. Or 10 through 15, which gets you out to the 28th. So I get it. I see what this is doing. And I'm just asking the question I started this video off with, like, how much is La Niña influencing any of this? Because I've told you at the beginning, you're going to see every long-range forecast look wet. And I don't think it's because of the MJO. I mean, the MJO is currently here in the Indian Ocean now. Hasn't been there for a while. But it's got to get over here to phase 4 or 5 for there to be a major influence. And maybe it's going to do that. That'd be the logical progression. It'd pop out here, phase 5 or phase 4. And that's just to your north. That's sitting over, what we call the maritime continent. That's just north of Australia. And I think the model wants that. The New European, all the way up to Christmas, has got wet for nearly everywhere. I mean, just take a look. It's really got an abundant amount of precipitation. A lot of stuff going on in the tropics in terms of moving moisture around, and then apparently just enough lift to create a pretty widespread region of chances for showers and storms. So this went aggressively wetter for the end of the year, all the way up to Christmas. Now, I'm going to come back to where we started. How much of this can we attribute to La Niña? Using one of my favorite models, the European, knowing you've got to get the ocean temperatures below that line in order for us to call this La Niña. Okay, we're bumbling around in here, but there's a whole lot of INSO-neutral in this. And if you look at the ocean temperatures forecast for December, January, February, this is just not the La Niña of our recent past. I'm talking about the one in 20 and 21 and 22. It was much stronger, had a deeper pool of colder water here. We watched the Indian Ocean dipole respond. There's not a strong Indian Ocean dipole signal here right now. One may develop, but I see a lot of warm water surrounding Australia. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on Australia, and I'm going to show you the precipitation patterns that the models are kicking out during that time. And it's no surprise to me that they're this wet. I'm just saying, you got to prove it to me. I have got to be able to see the atmosphere continue to give us better chances of rising motion, which means you can get clouds and precipitation. We got to park high pressure off the coast to pull the moisture in. We have to have systems that are able to tap into some tropical moisture from the north, but push their way across the rest of Australia with fronts to deliver some rainfall. But once again, we've got the model December, January, February, getting into the heart of summer that's wet. It's even wetter January, February, March, and February, March, April. And on the temperature side of it, let's flip over and just have a look at that. We'll just look at the seasonal temperature anomalies. If we go back, there's December, January, February. No strong anomalously high or low temperatures, neither for January, February, March, or February, March, and April. So interesting to see the wetter bias, but not the hotter bias. And I can back this up with another model. This is from our United States Climate Prediction Center. We actually run 8 different models called the NMME, National Multi-Model Ensemble. I'll show it to you a bunch of times. Let's look at global precipitation rate for season 1. So here's the models. See them all? This is the aggregate. And what's important about this is what did it do for December, January, February? It's wet as well. And if we go back here, how about we just stretch it out again? This would now be the newest January, February, March. And I just think all of these models are too aggressively wet at this point. Now, are there going to be places that get wet? Yeah, sure. There's always that. Even in drought years, there are still some places that seem to catch storms, right? You know this. But this call for a very wet pattern, I think, is where the models have overbid into the effects of La Nina. And I want to caution all of you, just like I did with the last El Nino, to kind of take this with a grain of salt. And that's why I built you the website. You can watch week in and week out to see how the pattern changes, and you have a better handle on it going forward. Okay, next, I'm going to give you a quick update around the world, and we'll wrap this one up. If we look globally right now, there's some interesting things that are happening. Very stormy pattern throughout Europe. And I don't know if you heard about this, but major flooding in like Valencia, Spain, way back at the beginning of the month, I think it was. Gosh, it feels like forever ago. Take note of how wet we've got things in parts of China. Much of the rest of Europe is wet. There's really a lot of cold air in here as well, which means we're building some snowpack across the northern tier of North America. You can see your pattern. Let's go to South America before I finish up with the U.S. Long story short, it's been raining for 3 weeks now. We've had rain getting into what we call the center west growing area. And that's resulted in some very rapid planting. Now, when I talked to you last time, I showed you that they were off by 35% from a year ago, and they just surpassed them on Friday. So last year, right now, in parts of South America, they went into, in big sections of Brazil, 3 months of near record dryness. In fact, it was the driest it had been since World War II. And I don't see that this year. All indications, as you just saw, are looking, very wet. And I don't see any major stresses coming towards South America in the near term. In the longer term, I think I'm most concerned about this. Let's just go back here. Let's take this over towards South America. And I want to show you the precipitation patterns for, let's go January, February, March. I'm worried about drought here and drought there. Now that's northeast Brazil. That's not the same capacity for agriculture as the central part and the center west, which is Mato Grosso. But Argentina is looking quite dry in the forecast models, and it has for a while. And to be honest, that would be a typical La Nina signal. So I'm going to have to call it into question as well. In fact, I've been telling these Argentinian growers that I'm not 100% convinced that's the case. The other thing is the United States. We went into an absolutely epic drought in September and October through so much of the U.S. And then look at this. November came with a pattern change. And now everywhere that you see the number 1, it's the wettest start to any November in our historical records, which go back to 1893. And I make this point because this is our hard red winter wheat belt right here. And you know that fall or autumn precipitation is key before the crop gets into dormancy during our winter. We're about to get a major outbreak of cold air in here, and we're also going to see some really wet conditions continue to hammer this same spot. Our drought areas are now getting pushed into the northeast and into the southwest. Big sections of California, our Central Valley is quite dry right now. In fact, there was a huge dust storm here this weekend or Monday. I think it was Monday that came through there. But in the middle part of the country, extremely wet. And as you saw in the forecast, they're continuing to get really wet conditions to come through this area. So we're watching all of this transition. We're going into dormancy and, just winter time frame across the northern tier of, the northern hemisphere, South America, this is the critical time for their crops. And of course, understanding your crop mix versus winter crops and summer crops in Australia is key. But that's what I've got. This is what we're looking at right now. And just understand that my confidence has dropped off a lot lately with some of the new evidence I've seen on the strength of this La Nina, despite the models wanting to give us a very La Nina-like flavor to everything. So we'll watch it together. I really appreciate it that you tune into this, and we'll just talk again soon. Thanks.